That's me. I'm around 9 years old in this picture. But this film isn't about me. It's about a place that helped thousands of boys and girls grow up to become functioning young men and women. A place where they learned how to laugh, cry, fight, make friends. A place to live in the true spirit of America. Where the person sleeping next to you could have been black, white, Jewish, Muslim, and you still call them your brother or sister. It was a microcosm of America. That place was called Happy Valley. To understand how a place like Happy Valley could exist, we have to go back to the beginning, to the spirit of why there was a Happy Valley. It all started in an area in lower Manhattan that was known as the Five Points. The name Five Points was derived from a five-pointed intersection. The Five Points was uniquely American. It was arguably the most diverse neighborhood in the world in the early 1800s. It was home to newly freed slaves, Jewish immigrants, Irish, Italian, and Chinese that came from California because of the Chinese Exclusion Act. It was also rampant with crime, drugs, homelessness, and prostitution. The Five Points is alleged to have sustained the highest murder rate of any slum in the world. According to an old New York urban legend, the Old Brewery, an overcrowded tenement on Cross Street, housed more than 1,000 poor. It is said to have had a murder a night for 15 years until its demolition in 1852. On one of his visits to the area, Charles Dickens described the Five Points like this.
This is the place. These narrow ways, diverting to right and left, and reeking everywhere with dirt and filth. Such lives as are led here bear the same fruits here as elsewhere. The coarse and bloated faces at the doors have counterparts at home and all the wide world over. Debauchery has made the very houses prematurely old. See how the rotten beams are tumbling down, and how the patched and broken windows seem to scowl dimly like eyes that have been hurt in drunken frays. Many of those pigs live here. Do they ever wonder why their masters walk upright in lieu of going on all fours, and why they talk instead of grunting?
There were many organizations and programs created to address the squalor of the Five Points. One program that was instituted was the orphan trains.
In 1929, a 75-year period, over 273,000 children were sent out of New York City by rail all across the nation, and they were taken in by farm families and professionals and ordinary people who took these children in and tried to give them a better life. The orphan trains were the brainchild of Charles Loring Brace, a Connecticut minister who was appalled at the conditions he saw in the Five Points area of New York City. So he decided that these children should be taken out of the city and would have a better life.
One other organization that was formed was the Ladies' Home Missionary Society. This organization was created to help alleviate the horrid conditions of the Five Points. They purchased an old brewery and helped form the Five Points Mission House of Industry. The building housed a chapel, a training school for mothers, a dispensary, and a day nursery. The conditions in the Five Points were brought to a breaking point in 1909 when an outbreak of diphtheria forced the Ladies' Home Mission Society to escalate plans to move the children from the Five Points to the country to live amongst the fresh air and nature. In 1911, 288 acres of farmland from the Happy Valley Farm in Pomona, New York, was donated to the mission by a trustee member named William Church Osborne. This was the beginning of Happy Valley. Over the next 20 years, many cottages were built as the population at the farm continued to grow. The children helped build the homes under the supervision of the staff that included master builders and masons. The early life in Happy Valley was set up to be as close to a normal home life as possible, with 2 house parents in the home and meals that were cooked in the home by the house parents and the children. The children also had daily chores, and the older children could work outside of the home. The boys worked with the maintenance men, and the girls would help in the offices. As the country was going through the ravages of the Great Depression, Happy Valley was pretty much unscathed because there was also farming and woodworking, which made them somewhat self-sufficient, which helped them get through the Depression. Yet, they still received children in need.
My father abandoned his family of 6 boys during the Big Depression. The welfare folks took the 5 of us to live at Happy Valley: Norman, Erling, Wesley, Delmore, and myself, Arnold. I was the youngest. I was between 2 and 3 years old. I remember the subway ride there, but the rest of the trip escapes me. I was placed in a cottage which held about 15 small kids like me. You went to work after school at age 12. You got off the bus from Spring Valley High School, changed your clothes, and reported to the adult in charge. The boy shoveled sand into the dump truck. I did some furniture repairs and various jobs with Mr. Mills, who was a carpenter, cabinet maker, wood carver, landscape architect, and headed up the snow shoveling gang in winter. My brothers started to leave Happy Valley one by one. My older brother Norman left to go live with my father in California. My brother Erling ran away. That left Delmore and myself at the institution. After some time, I landed in the same cottage as Del, and it was the first time I lived with a brother since entering Happy Valley. We smoked his pipe together and hung around each other, and life looked better. But then Del was sent to Staten Island, and I was devastated by being left at Happy Valley by myself. I hated everything and everyone, and then I sank into a depression. I figured this out for myself not too many years ago. About a year later, I was called to the admission building by Dr. William H. Mandry. The superintendent asked me if I wanted to go live with my mother or my father. I was 15 years old by then. I decided to go to my mother because that's where Del went, and I wanted to be with him. It was quite a decision to put to a 15-year-old. Shortly thereafter, I said goodbye to all I could and rode to New York City. I was there from 1932 to 1944. The welfare worker escorted me to Staten Island. The apartment was a dump, a cold water, unheated, 4-room flat, many years old, plaster falling from the ceiling, etc. But I remembered bracing myself and reminded myself that this was home, and the lady was my mother, and Del was there. There are many things I recall about Happy Valley. First of all, it was misnamed. It wasn't happy for the we kids at all. Mandry was a mean person who ruled with an iron fist. This would have been okay if Happy Valley was for bad kids, but it was not. To be told to go see Dr. Mandry was a very scary thing. He kept a thick paddle in his office and would make the offending kid bend over the armchair, and he got whacked severely. But there were many good adults and kids there, and I remember a few to this day.
In the late 1930s and early 1940s, Americans were called to war, and the boys from Happy Valley answered. Two of the boys from Happy Valley were Arthur and Henry Tasaka, Japanese Americans who were attached to the 442nd Infantry Unit. Both received many citations for bravery, and both were injured twice in battle. While pinned down under heavy enemy fire in Brieux's, France, Arthur rescued a seriously wounded comrade and administered first aid, thus saving the man's life. The children of Happy Valley were pretty much shielded from most of the horrors of World War II. After the war, the country was experiencing unprecedented prosperity, and with it, a new, affluent class was created. This period in U.S. history saw the start of a cultural shift, a result of the birth of the baby boomers. But in spite of all of this, there continued to be a need for Happy Valley, and they continued to accept children.
I'm guessing I was there from about 32 or 33
So what, 40?
to 40. My birthday was in November and I left in October. I wasn't, well, it was a month before my 18th birthday, but
Joan, when did you come there? You remember the year?
I was born in 1935, so I would say 33.
About 1933?
Yeah,
And she left about, what,
54.
1954? I came there in 1955.
Okay, my name is Ann Cherney Parker, and I arrived at Happy Valley in 1947 and left after I finished high school in 1956.
My name is Carol Wens Pierce. I went to Happy Valley in 1945 and I left in 1957. I graduated.
I'm Pete Carney. I went to Happy Valley in 1949 and left 16 years later in 1965.
And Carol, you guys were there together, Carol and Ann, you guys were in Happy Valley together?
We all were.
At the same time? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, he's one of
the
our
baby.
Oh, Pete was the baby?
I was a good-looking little baby.
You were cute.
Squeezed together.
We could just move over a bit towards that side. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Dan said you grew up.
I'm Jim Ashcroft. I lived at Happy Valley School for 8 years or so. I came there in 1956, I believe, and I graduated from Spring Valley High School in 64.
My name is Thelma Ann Ashcroft Green.
When did you get to Happy Valley and leave?
I came to Happy Valley when I was 11 years old, so I believe that was like in the late 50s maybe. I really can't remember, but I came when I was 11. I'm 67 now, so that's why I can't remember.
they took me and my half-sister away because we were skipping school, and that's when I got put away for the rest of them until I left Happy Valley.
Mel Hancock. I got to Happy Valley in, I'm a little foggy too, but I believe it was 1965, and I left in 1972.
Okay. My name is Marit Henriksen Sorensen. My father was Walter Henriksen, and he was the assistant director and then became the executive director at Happy Valley. I was born in Nyack, New York, and moved to Happy Valley as a baby in 1952.
My name is Dawn McGillicuddy, and I was in Happy Valley from 1970 to 1973, towards the end of 1973. And I wound up in Happy Valley because me and both of my sisters who were older were taken away from our mom, and we ended up at Happy Valley.
Okay. My name is Debbie Mills, and I came to Happy Valley when I was 6 months old in 1956. And I was there until way into the late years because I also worked there after I graduated high school.
I believe I got to Happy Valley around 1963.
I went by myself. My brothers were already there for a few years, and my mother remarried and, actually took up another relationship, and then they had businesses and they couldn't handle me at home, so they sent me to Happy Valley with my brothers.
Well, my name's Ellen Beatty. And oh gosh, I lived on Camp Hill Road from the age of 3. And my mom was the first person who worked at Happy Valley. She was the gym teacher.
For girls or both? I don't know.
I think for both. And my father coached the basketball team at night.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. You and I were really young. We were very young. It was Jimmy and Margaret, that whole crowd. So it was early 60s, mid 60s.
Okay, yeah.
And
we were very young.
We were very young. We were like 7. But gosh, and it just so happened that I guess at Happy Valley, when kids turned 16,
oh, we went to Pomona.
We went to Pomona, but I had so many brothers and sisters from Happy Valley, like Jimmy and Margaret, Richie, Carney, Phil, Sales. So many people came to live with us because at a certain age at Happy Valley, you weren't allowed to be at Happy Valley anymore. So I kind of grew up, you know.
You consider them your family?
Oh, completely. Yeah.
I just want to, I remember your mother.
And your brother, Jimmy. Jimmy lived with us. That's right. Yes, Jimmy lived with us. Oh, gosh.
Oh, I didn't know. Oh, yeah.
At least a summer.
Wow, I just got goosebumps. Now I remember.
I love Jimmy.
Wow.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, my mom and dad drank and they split. My mother left us. And my grandmother used to take care of us. And then when she passed away, we had nobody to watch us because my father being an alcoholic. And so we were put into homes. But I was in a home in the Bronx. I think it was part of 5 Points. And then we went to Happy Valley from there. There was 3 girls and my brother.
Yeah, my family actually came from Salt Lake City. And they arrived in New York City. And it's a long story, but it all had to deal with a fire. My mother, I had never met my father. I don't even know who he was. But my mother, I guess, had set a fire in a building to keep us warm and stuff like that. And then the building caught on fire. Then it became headlines in the New York Times, whatever it was. And then I guess they got wind of it at Happy Valley. The director up there was Mr. Ashforth at the time. I guess they wanted to get the family back together. We were put in separate foster homes. And they put us all back together, and all 5 of us went up to the home up there. And my brother Don was a little older and all. I was very young. I was like a year and a half when I went up there. So that's actually how I got up there. But it's a longer story than that.
Well, let's see. My father died in 1945 when I was 6. And I think what the unfortunate part is that he died of pneumonia, which of course is very easily cured at this time, but at that time they couldn't. My mother was incapable, emotionally unstable, And somewhere along the line, we got into the social welfare system.
The reasons why I was in Happy Valley and along with my brothers and sisters, my father was working, but he wasn't making a lot of money. My mother was from North Carolina, who came up and got little jobs here and there in the city, but it wasn't enough to hold the family together. So the social service and I guess the court systems took over. And
Well, when I was first up Happy Valley, I cried for weeks.
Really?
Because here he came up and didn't even see me.
All right, your father. What happened to your mother?
I don't ever recall anything about my real mother.
The negatives, well, no, the negatives were that we were basically in an orphanage, and I mean, come on,
But we didn't know. We didn't know.
There was no attention really, you know,
saying, yeah.
from parental figures. We did get the hell beat out of us by a couple of really crazy house mothers.
Now you mentioned you had some negative experiences at Happy Valley.
Oh yes, we all did. We all had negatives. I'm going to say it right. We all have a negatives, but you have to go past through these things. And you know, life has been good to me. I'll be honest with you. I work hard, and I have no against of anybody. But you have to learn to forgive. You have to learn to show your love to other people. Yeah.
Have any negative, any bad stuff?
Well, when I got out of there, this one lady was from Tennessee. She was a house mother. She came to me with a baseball bat, and I defended myself and put her in the hospital, so they kicked me out. Otherwise, that was okay. I was 17 at that time.
Looking back in retrospect, other kids had the same issues. Other families out there who have parents, live with their parents. We just didn't know that. And sure, someone's going to say something about your shoes or your clothing, but that's how we became tough. That's how you became tough. You know.
All kidding aside, but when they used to see our bus drive up to Spring Valley High School, the first thing everybody yelled, "Watch your wallets." That's the first thing everybody said.
So was there a stigma attached to being in the do you guys feel that? Anybody?
The stigma I felt was like the thing that hit me most when I went to public school was like our clothes. Like we didn't have a lot of clothes, and we always had to wear the same clothes all the time. You know, hand-me-downs, and other kids in the schools would see that, and they would get the same red socks with the diamonds on, I guess. Because I was like, sort of like the big wheel at the high school, all-county football player and all this other stuff. And then it was graduation night. I remember I was sitting in the stands at the Spring Valley High School field, and it was graduation night. And we're all sitting there, and everybody's fooling around in the stands with pea shooters. And I remember when everybody was taking their caps and gowns off, they all went to meet their parents. I was all by myself. I walked in all by myself to the, I can't even talk about it today. But it was the saddest day of my life. And it went around me in the gym, put my cap and gown and I walked on. So.
Not that, it was hard in a sense that there was no one to give you a hug and say they loved you or anything like that. But otherwise, it was a great place. There were plenty of sports, and you made the best of it. Yeah.
What does it do to a person not having a hug as a child?
That's interesting. I think that you are hurt in some, you're scarred in some way because you know what you're supposed to do, but you don't often feel that you had the foundation to do everything that you really wanted to do. And so you are scarred. You are, like, I have to be honest, I went through therapy a lot on my own that I paid for just to figure out what had happened to me. And so for many years I went to therapy, and it made me a stronger, better person.
At one time, years ago, we actually had a barn with horses and stuff.
Yeah, I remember the
And
pigs.
the horses we had before the pigs. The horses were, when I was small, the barn burnt down, and a lot of the horses were were killed. But then, like I said, we grew everything. Because in there, you go string beans, you go
Because I remember there
corn.
was a root cellar.
Yeah,
We had
yeah,
to put stuff in
yeah,
cans and
yeah.
bottles.
And years ago, when you had a house thing, we always canned.
All the women get up and get them in the seats.
People don't can today, but years ago you canned in the little bottles.
Right.
You put them
In the jars.
in the jars,
I remember.
and then we used to have a guy used to come there with coal, and then you had the thing. And
But see, we used to call it house girls. Like 2 at a time. You would have to get up in the morning, put on cocoa, have cocoa. Yeah.
We had to peel the potatoes before we went to school, I remember.
Yeah.
We'd be sitting down for family dinner on a holiday, and all of a sudden that phone would ring, and there was some argument or some disagreement going on, and Dad would have to leave the table and go settle it. But as we grew older, we got used to it, knew that was just all part of the norm of being part of the school and this unique experience. So we realized also at that point that he wasn't just our father anymore, and my mother, who worked in the office, wasn't just my mother anymore. They became the father and mother for all the other students at the school. So it really was a wonderful experience, and it didn't even dawn on me until my father passed away and how many of the students came to his funeral, that how he had touched their lives.
And what was a typical day like on Happy Valley when you were there?
Well, you had school. After school, you had to work.
What type of work?
Well, you either worked on a farm. I got in with Ed Mott doing painting.
I know the name.
Ed Mott, he was up there with Mills and all that.
Oh, okay.
And Saturday you worked just about all day.
What type of work?
Well, for a while I was working out in the garden, you know, where you weeded, stuff like that. I hated that. That's why I got in with Mott, and then I went painting, and that was a lot better.
Was it still a farm there?
Oh yeah.
What type of animals?
Well, they had a couple of horses for dragging the wagons around. The snow time they had a V thing made out of wood that they would put the horses up and clear the roads.
That was the plow?
Yeah, at the time.
And I mean, you would take off in the morning. You'd just be, what was it, 400 acres? Where the hell you were?
The sand pits, yeah.
Jumping off like 50 feet to sand.
It was fun. We had a great time.
Yeah, we did. Oh yeah.
In the water towers, yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They're still there.
Yeah.
Well, you had to work from the age of 12. You had to work every day, and I used to work as we would fill in, dig cesspools, dig weeds out, prune trees. I remember one day I was working on a truck, and my mother had come up earlier in the morning, gave me a bag of potato chips, and I had my arm slung over the gas nozzle there and eating the potato chips as the truck was moving. And I slipped off the truck, and the back wheels, went right over my legs. And surprisingly, I was able to get up. My shoes were thrown there and there, and they said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't have any feeling in my legs, but otherwise I could walk." So, they gave you off for a couple of hours, and then a couple of days later, I went back to work. But for 9 months, I had no feeling in my legs, but it came back.
Nobody's going to deny you got fed well. We had our own cows, chickens. I think we must have about 6,000 chickens.
So it was a working farm?
Oh, it was a working farm. Yeah, we had steers.
Did the women work? Did the women work on the farm at all? Or?
No.
Generally on Saturday nights, you'd see everybody at the movie in the gymnasium. And they kept the girls over here and the boys over here. You weren't allowed to go near each other.
I learned how to cook, clean, sew, socialize with people. I had some skills that taught me how to be a parent because we had structure. So you had to eat 3 meals a day. You had to eat nutritious meals. We learned how to iron, learned how to wash clothes. We did our homework.
As Melvin said, we got up each morning. We had chores assigned to us. We had to do certain things, but we had a roof over our head. We had a warm bed. some of the house parents might not have been as nice as we would have wanted them to be, but that's a whole other story.
You mentioned the Sanchez's and Mott. These were my bigger brothers. I remember watching Dave Riley and Tommy Riley. These guys play basketball. I remember the girls having a basketball, softball teams.
I love sports. I was one of their top-notch players, okay?
Oh, were you?
Yes. And we played against the other...
Plenty of sports. A lot of Happy Valley kids would go on to Spring Valley High School and be a lot of their sports stars, their runners. One of the kids, Jimmy Ashcroft, left Happy Valley High School and went to Florida A&M, and for a short period he was the fastest man in the world because he was a runner, and that's all we did up there is walk, run, and ride bicycles that we put together.
Basically play with us on the weekends. They would get together a baseball game, or we'd go to the gym, play basketball. And I think a lot of my sports was built on that foundation.
You played sports in high school?
I did.
College?
I played sports.
She's a very good basketball player.
She used to beat us in basketball, I'll tell you.
I played sports when I was in high school. And then I went to college and I made the basketball team. And while I was at Rockland Community College, I found the love of field hockey. Absolutely enjoyed it and excelled at that. Made the field hockey team at Cortland State. And sports was my background and I loved it. To this day I enjoy it. I can't play it anymore. Getting older. Injuries. But everybody knows how that is.
Dealing socially with the different cultures, has that helped you?
It definitely helped me. I mean, as a child, I don't think I realized there was a difference between the different cultures that came there. So it was a really good thing. And then as I went into high school and college, it just, especially during the turbulent late 60s and 70s, it really didn't make any difference to me whatsoever.
They're shocked by the amount of racism that they encountered or sexism. Did you experience?
Yeah, sometimes our parents are very discriminate.
Right.
And my father didn't want me to talk to certain people, and I cried my heart out because I didn't understand what he was talking about. So he was the first person as your parents being very prejudiced against another race.
Wow.
And I couldn't understand him. And then I went against him in a way.
Right.
Because I figured, like, why you act like that for? And I didn't understand why he didn't want me to talk to certain people. And it just blew my mind. So all the time I end up crying because of it, you know?
Because it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's
an interesting discussion that we have. Now, you had all these different colored brothers, and I don't think many people messed with you guys either.
No, not with my father around. And we also had bigger brothers who,
that's what
but I was also not called the N word, but I was called the N lover. And I just let it go in one ear and out the other. Because I see you as Yvonne, not as being...
A lot of guys joined the service right out of there because they were trained, they were living in barracks in a sense, right next to, and it was free of racism too. It was, we had, black, white, Arab, a couple of Jewish kids, and
you were part of it,
I just considered myself a part of the big family.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe my sister has different views, but I don't think so because she kind of feels the same way I do. I mean, she's living in South Carolina, so she couldn't be here, but she even says too, they're all my brothers and sisters. Like you said before, there was no color.
No.
We weren't growing up, we never were taught the difference between a black person, a white person, a brown person, whatever. It was just, they were a person and we were all God's, God's children, and that's it.
It was difficult. It was a difficult period going back to that time, diversity and stuff. Who should I spend my time with? And the the vernacular back in those days was, kill Whitey and so on and so
Uncle
forth.
Tom, if you didn't hang with him,
It wasn't, and that question that you posed, it was a rough time.
Yeah.
Not so much identity crisis, just okay, this is my friend. I mean, how can I hang with her and not upset this group of people?
Right.
So,
And I didn't see the racism. I didn't see that we were in the same dorm, slept together,
I never,
same room.
I never heard the N word.
No.
I never heard the N word until I got to Spring Valley High School.
The whole country. 1964, the Civil Rights Act. Okay, I went down south, and my father was telling me, the Jim Crow. Jim Crow laws, and Jim Crow, and that. I never heard of it. But my father schooled me on it before I went down. And we didn't experience that. But we knew there were differences, but we never exploited one another.
Celebrated those things.
Yeah, we definitely did. We stuck together. And like you said, we went to Spring Valley, wherever. I remember this summertime Bible school. So in a group of black kids and white kids coming in together. And every summer we had to do that. Every Sunday morning we had to get up and go down to the chapel.
Even if you were
because I remember like Gary Lowe was Jewish, and he it was more of a discipline that we had to go to church.
You mentioned
anyone in particular having a profound effect on you? Or?
Jimmy Ashcroft.
Really?
Jimmy Ashcroft, when he was in high school, he was my idol. And I remember when he would be out practicing for his track events, and he used to run up and down the street, and he had set up a dash course where he had the blocks, and he'd run and time himself running down the road. And every once in a while, as I was a little girl, and he'd let me run with him, and lots of times he'd let me beat him to make me feel good. And then I think when he went on to, after high school, to college and became a gym teacher, and then came back and he worked with me in the rec program, it kind of helped me along my way to become a gym teacher or a physical education teacher. So I would say he probably made a big influence on my life, a big part of my life.
Albie, back to Albie. Albie was, he really put me on the right course, He actually said things to me like, you're going to be famous one day. Well, I never became famous, but he said, you're going to be famous one day because you have the gift of gab, He said, you never stop talking. So he was probably my most influential person.
And who was the most influential person in your life from Happy Valley?
From Happy Valley? I would say Miss Lynn, our house mother. When I went, I might get emotional.
It's all right. It's good.
Yeah. But when I went into one cottage, and it didn't work out. So Miss Lynn made space for me at Ford, and I went over there, and I stayed there until I left in 1970. And I choose her because she taught me how to nurture and how to love children.
How about most influential person that you met?
The most influential person I met was Mr. Henriksen, and he's gone. I used to babysit his children. I must say I was a bad little girl. Not compared to today, but I used to sneak down the hill to see the boys. Don't go to bed on time. Sneak out the house, go to Spring Valley to the movies. They put me on punishment, but Mr. Henriksen would take me off of punishment and let me come down to his house and babysit his kids. I love Mr. Henriksen. He was like a dad to me, and he showed me love.
Now,
Mr. Henriksen is very good, and Mr. and Mrs. Frank Morello.
And Happy Valley.
For you personally.
Everybody was wonderful to me, and I couldn't pinpoint anybody. I remember their kindness and their sweetness, and nobody was harsh to me, and nobody was really mean, that I could say, oh, I don't like that person. I think everybody was really wonderful, really. When I look back in my life now, they're great people.
And then I had a gym teacher. Well, she wasn't from Happy Valley, so leave that
you can, Mr. Langman?
Vicki Langemeyer, who was a physical education teacher. She just died recently.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Used to bring me home. I remember her husband and Vicki on my 16th birthday. They took me to McDonald's. I even remember the movie that they took me to. A movie. It was
Cheaper by the Dozen?
Yes.
Oh, really?
By the Dozen. Yes, that was the movie that I saw.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's the
And then they took me to when I left to go to college. The expo was playing in Montreal that year. I was going to go to the expo, but something happened. They ended up taking me to Niagara Falls, and I went on the Canadian side and the you step over and it's Canadian, but gorgeous, and I'll never experience those. I'll never forget that experience. But thank you. Okay.
No, fine, thanks.
But and she passed away recently, and we remained friends to the day she passed. But those are the people that influenced me the most.
Well, I don't want to cry.
No, I was actually. She's sweating. I see this because the heat. You know, the light. You could just wipe.
And that's what mine is too.
Yeah. Sure.
But the people that influenced me, you know, don't you stop.
Well, when I cry, I'm going to really do a good job.
Debbie's mother and father. I mean, I don't know what to say.
I think Melvin was the son my parents never had, to be honest with you, because my mother always used to say to him, "Would you please stop jumping around?" He was like a little spitfire.
Yeah.
I mean, he never sat still, and it's just amazing. No?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's crazy. So you know, like I said, I don't know what the word is other than love or something like that. I don't know how it happens, so I don't question it anymore. I would imagine, like when we were younger, we questioned how and why and what.
They had so much love to give.
Yeah,
that was who they were. So I wasn't really.
I guess, like Melvin says, the inspiration of also too that I got was from my parents and my grandparents. There were also other people too. Mr. Hendrickson was also one. He also had children there too. Excuse me, thank you. Marit and Teddy were also children that grew up there as well. And Marit went on to be a teacher.
Yeah.
I don't know what
she's retiring this year.
Yeah, she told me
I saw
that.
on Facebook.
Yeah. I don't know what her brother did, but he moved to California, but he's back here now.
Yeah.
He's living in Greenland Lake by her. And there were other family members, but those, my parents and Mr. and Mrs. Hendrickson and Mr. and Mrs. Ashworth, because they were there so long and their families lived there, like I said, there were several other families, but their children weren't as interactive as what my sister and I were, or Marit and Teddy were. So we, I guess our two families were the families that had the best experience out of everybody.
Once again, the country called, and the boys and girls answered. The Happy Valley Kids joined every branch of our military, as well as serving in the State Department.
They used to ask us, pick 3 things you like. And when we were only received 1 thing out of the 3 things. And it was like sort of enchantment, really lovely.
That someone just brought up to me was the helicopter dropping peanut. I have not thought about that in like 30-something years, and I'm like, yeah, I remember.
So what was it? Nobody knows what you're talking about, except for me.
Right, like
So-
what was that about anyway?
These guys might want to know the camera, so you got to tell them because I never even mentioned it actually.
I just have this memory of peanuts being thrown out of a helicopter, and
Be a baseball field.
yeah, and.
I mean, I came up from Queens, which is an urban area, and I just remember getting up and walking around in these woods. I guess there were woods at that. I don't know what else to call them. And being scared by like pheasants. I never knew. I'm from Queens. I don't know what a pheasant is. Wow, this thing would take off, and I'm thinking, what the heck? What am I doing here? And I never experienced any of that. I kind of grew to enjoy that kind of freedom, and just the being able to like connect with nature, and like the guys I lived with were into the same thing. We get up and we go out into the woods from 8 o'clock in the morning and come back at 7 o'clock at night. Just stayed on those grounds and did what we wanted to. Play basketball. There were a lot of things to do, but we did carve out a niche of what we. Some guys loved animals, like Alvin. One guy, Alvin, all he did was bring animals back home to the cottage.
Yeah, when I lived in Happy Valley, like I was 12 years old, and you could go out and babysit to earn you like 50 cents an hour. And I met a family called the and they were like German, like Polish, and I babysat for them for a couple of years. On Saturdays, I would come and clean their house for $1 an hour. They fell in love with me, and they had 5 children, and in the summer, I used to go with them. They lived in New City. I used to go with them for the summer and be what they call a mother's helper. And when I was like 15 or 16, I believe I was in like the 11th or 12th grade, and they took me to live with them on a permanent basis because they loved me. And they had 5 kids. I'm Afro-American, and they were German Polacks. And I found out much, much later in life, they was kind of wealthy because they had a nice house in New City, that the mother got pregnant before she ever got married by a black man, and that's probably why she just loved me to death, because they made her give her daughter up for adoption.
I was thinking of something funny. When my dad was the house parent at the boys' cottages, when the boys did not get up, he either would come and tip their mattresses over or pour cold water on them to get them up because they wouldn't get up.
But it wasn't like, hey,
and that's not abuse, you know what I mean? I mean, maybe today people would think that.
Waterboarding.
Yeah, right. I remember.
I
You remember that?
I remember that to my kids.
Talk about graduation. I remember 2 things that were memorable to me in Happy Valley. Graduation, Mr. Henriksen was there for me. My mother and my father did show up. First time my father has been there in a long time.
And I always made sure I did my homework. So one day he came out and gave me an F. And I said, how the heck did I get an F? I said, when the guy over there got an A. He said, I know. He said, but next time you won't let the guy take your homework.
Name your brothers.
Jimmy and George.
Jimmy and George. One of the Hancock boys used to put the little kids on his back and dive down to the drain in the deep end of the pool. It was Jimmy.
Christmas time, we all used to go, I don't know if Jimmy and the other folks talked about it, we used to go to the Elks Club, to the gym. Yeah. We used to have a man come and do magic shows. It was the same magician, and it was the same magic every year, but we didn't care. We didn't care. It was there for us, and we enjoyed it, and we used to go to the Elks Clubs, and everybody got a gift. And we used to, yes, I used to go. My sister used to go, and we used to have a little tiny bus that we used to travel.
A little tiny bus.
We used to travel on.
Are you little yellow school?
Why did you subject yourself to
like she had a choice, right?
It was my social life. You know, I went to work with my mom, and on Friday nights, like I was telling you, there was that rec hall in the bottom of the main house. There was a little hall. There was the main house, and then at the bottom there was a basement. And my mother also ran the Friday night youth group or some Friday night social. And everybody would come and play music and dance.
Good experience.
Anything else you want to add?
Plus, I ended up going to college, got my BA degree. Good. So I thought it was a good experience, yes.
Great.
We grew up with all different nationalities, and everybody was our brother and sisters. I never looked at anybody saying, gee, he's different than me and she's different than me. Never. I grew up like just like they were different flowers. So when I went out to the world, you know, I love people, and I think it's because of Happy Valley, and we grew up with all these different race and nationality. I think it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And in fact, the whole world should be like that.
I will have to say overall, Happy Valley was the most stability that I ever had in my entire childhood.
I hate to see all these places going down to nothing, because there's so many kids out there now that could use a place like we did. Because we grew up, it wasn't we didn't have all the happiest times in the world. We had our good times and we had our bad times. But believe me, when you come out, you learn a lot.
If you could sum up your Happy Valley experience in one word or a sentence, what would it be?
I would say for me, a blessing.
Other than my children, the best experience of my life.
I would say a miracle. In one word, describe Happy Valley. Carol?
I think it was wonderful.
Discipline. Has to be the word discipline. I learned discipline there.
That's so true.
Well, especially as a young girl, I think security. Stable environment.
No worries.
Yeah.
Jim?
I'd say the love.
Sounds like home to me.
Yeah, it does.
All of that put together is home.
All right. Well, if you want to add anything, go ahead. And other than that, we're good to go, right? You got anything you want?
We're good. That's wonderful.
Well, now we got to visit.
Now, okay, we're going to start recording. We're going to start recording in 10 minutes now. That was nice. Very nice. I like it.
Don't get so
The United States, while not perfect, was born out of humanity in search of a new world, one that involved freedom, tolerance, empathy, stability, and love. It was and continues to be a work in progress. Happy Valley was a microcosm of that endeavor. While imperfect, Happy Valley provided empathy, stability, and love to the many children who resided there. If those walls could talk, they would say, family. It is akin to our national motto, E pluribus unum. Out of many, one.